In the outskirts of General Santos, a small city in southern Philippines, young Manny grew up amid the extreme poverty that plagued his family. At 7 years old, the skinny boy already carried on his shoulders the responsibility of helping support the home, where he shared the tiny space with his 6 siblings. His parents, tireless workers, could barely put food on the table every day, forcing little Manny to seek alternatives to satisfy the hunger that constantly tightened his stomach. The dusty streets of the Labangol neighborhood became his second home, where he sold loose cigarettes and homemade sweets to earn a few pesos. The unforgiving Philippine sun punished his skin as he walked miles daily, going door to door, with a shy smile that hid the exhaustion of a childhood stolen by necessity. Other boys his age played and studied, but Manny knew his path was different, marked by early sacrifices. In a small shack made of wood and tin near the Pacquiao family home lived Imelda Magsaysay, a middle-aged woman who worked as a seamstress. Widowed for several years, Imelda supported her 3 children alone, with the little she earned mending clothes and making small adjustments for local residents. Despite her own daily struggle, the woman with the gentle smile and calloused hands always found a way to extend her heart to neighbors in need. It was on a particularly difficult afternoon, when Manny had barely sold anything and his stomach ached with hunger, that he passed by Imelda's door. The seamstress, noticing the downcast look of the boy who determinedly passed her house every day, called him inside and, without asking questions, served him a steaming bowl of rice with a piece of fish. That simple gesture, born from the pure compassion of someone who knew the pain of scarcity, deeply marked the heart of the little fighter. From that day on, whenever Manny spent too long without being able to sell his products, Imelda invited him to eat. There was never much on the seamstress's table, but she shared what little she had with the neighboring boy, teaching him that generosity didn't depend on material wealth, but on the greatness of spirit. Between shared meals, Imelda also shared stories of perseverance and dreams, planting in the young boy's heart the seed of hope that better days would come through hard work and honesty. Years passed, and Manny found in boxing a way to escape the poverty that imprisoned his family. At just 16, he left General Santos for Manila, carrying in his worn backpack a few clothes and in his heart the memories of people who had helped him, including Imelda. The Philippine capital, with its skyscrapers and dazzling lights, represented a completely new world for the young man from the provinces, who slept in parks and trained tirelessly for a chance in the ring. His first professional fights earned him only a few pesos, barely enough to send some money home and feed himself. Manny's adolescent body, still developing, faced older and more experienced opponents, but his iron determination made up for the physical disadvantage. Each punch he threw carried the strength of someone fighting not just for a title, but for the survival of an entire family that depended on him. While Manny's career gained momentum in the Philippine rings, Imelda faced her own challenges in General Santos. A devastating flood had destroyed her small house and sewing equipment, leaving her homeless and without means of support. Her children, now adults, had moved to other cities in search of opportunities, and the woman, now aging and with deteriorating health, was taken in by a niece who lived in an even poorer neighborhood, on the slopes of a hill away from the city. The hands that once sewed with precision now trembled with the first signs of Parkinson's, making impossible the meticulous work that guaranteed her livelihood. Imelda spent her days helping with household chores in her niece's home, contributing as she could, while watching on the small black and white television sporadic news about the boy she had fed years ago, now transformed into a promising Filipino boxer. Victories began to accumulate on Manny's resume as he gradually gained international recognition and more lucrative contracts. Every penny saved was sent to his family in General Santos, allowing his parents and siblings to escape extreme poverty. The boxer, however, never forgot his roots and the people who had helped him when he needed it most, including Imelda, about whom he always asked when talking with relatives on the phone, unaware that the seamstress's life had taken such a difficult turn. Manny's meteoric rise in the world boxing scene transformed him into a national icon in the Philippines. His story of overcoming, rising from extreme poverty to become one of the greatest boxers of all time, inspired millions of Filipinos who saw themselves represented in his journey. Each fight broadcast on television paralyzed the entire country, with empty streets and bars full of fans vibrating with every movement of Pacman as he became known worldwide. Titles in multiple weight categories made Manny a living legend of the sport, while multi-million-dollar contracts and international sponsorships transformed the boy who sold loose cigarettes into one of the richest men in the Philippines. Mansions, luxury cars, and private jets were now part of his reality, but the boxer maintained the humility that characterized his personality since childhood, always remembering his origins and using his fortune to help poor communities throughout the country. Amid fame and growing responsibilities, including his entry into Philippine politics as a congressman, Manny never stopped thinking about returning to his roots in General Santos. The city that watched him grow constantly received his visits and investments, with construction of schools, hospitals, and community centers funded by the boxer. However, with each return, he felt there was something pending, a debt of gratitude that had not yet been paid. It was during a visit to a newly inaugurated hospital in General Santos that Manny accidentally met Reynaldo, Imelda's oldest son, who worked as a security guard at the establishment. The emotional encounter brought up childhood memories and surprising revelations about the current situation of the seamstress who had fed the little boxer decades ago. Reynaldo told how his mother had lost everything in the flood, developed Parkinson's, and now lived in precarious conditions with a niece, fighting daily against the limitations imposed by disease and poverty. The news fell like a weight on Manny's shoulders, who immediately assigned his team to locate Imelda's exact whereabouts. The boxer felt a mixture of guilt and determination, thinking about how he could have searched earlier for the woman who represented a beacon of hope in the darkest moments of his childhood. While his entourage organized the logistics for the meeting, Manny reflected on how to adequately repay the generosity of someone who, having so little, had given so much when he needed it most. The small wooden house on the hillside was far from offering comfort or security to its residents. Broken tiles allowed rainwater to form puddles on the dirt floor, while the thin walls trembled with the strong wind that frequently punished the region. It was in this environment that Imelda, now 72, spent her days sitting in a plastic chair on the improvised porch, observing the movement of the city in the distance. With eyes clouded by the cataracts that gradually stole her vision, Imelda's niece Julieta worked as a domestic employee in the homes of wealthier families, leaving before dawn and returning only at night, exhausted from the grueling journey. During the day, the elderly woman was alone, preparing with difficulty a simple meal on the wood stove and praying the rosary, her only company in the long hours of solitude. Her trembling hands no longer allowed her to sew, but Imelda still tried to make herself useful by washing some clothes and organizing the little they had in the simple house. That September afternoon, the sky of General Santos showed an intense blue without clouds when a convoy of luxury cars began to climb the dirt road that led to Julieta's house. The neighbors, intrigued by the unusual movement, came to the doors of their homes to observe the arrival of vehicles that completely clashed with the poverty scenario of the place. Imelda, sitting in her usual chair, noticed the agitation, but her compromised vision did not allow her to clearly distinguish what was happening. When Manny got out of the car, wearing simple clothes that contrasted with the luxury of the vehicle, a reverent silence took over the community. Everyone there instantly recognized the national idol, but no one dared to approach, observing from a distance the boxer who walked determinedly toward the simplest house on the hill. With a racing heart and a lump in his throat, Manny spotted the fragile figure of Imelda sitting on the porch, appearing only a shadow of the strong woman he had known in childhood. The moment their eyes met seemed to freeze time. Imelda, initially confused by the presence of a stranger at her door, widened her eyes in recognition when Manny came close enough for her blurry vision to distinguish the familiar features of the one who had once been the skinny boy she had fed decades ago. The elderly woman's trembling hands covered her mouth as silent tears ran down her wrinkled face marked by time and the difficulties of life. The meeting between Manny and Imelda transcended words. The boxer, visibly moved, knelt before the elderly woman's chair, holding her trembling hands between his, calloused by years of fights. At that moment, it wasn't the multi-millionaire world champion who was there, but the humble boy from La Bengal, eternally grateful for the plate of food he had received when hunger struck. The neighbors watched the scene from a distance, impressed by the humility of one of the country's biggest celebrities. Imelda, overcoming the initial surprise, touched Manny's face with trembling hands, as if to confirm that it wasn't a hallucination caused by her debilitated health. The years had completely transformed the frail boy into a strong man, but the gentle eyes remained the same, reflecting the determined soul she had known. The elderly woman smiled through tears, remembering the moments when little Manny sat at her simple table, devouring with gratitude the little she could offer. As they talked, recalling the past and catching up on the lost years, Manny's team discreetly evaluated the precarious conditions in which Imelda lived. The boxer listened attentively to the elderly woman's stories about how she had lost everything in the flood, the development of Parkinson's, and the financial difficulties she faced, depending almost exclusively on the limited help of her niece. With each word, Manny's determination grew to transform the reality of the one who had been so important in his journey. At the end of the afternoon, when Giulietta returned from work and found her simple house surrounded by luxury cars and security, she could hardly believe what her eyes saw. Imelda's niece, exhausted after a whole day cleaning other people's houses, was greeted by Manny Pacquiao himself, who explained his connection with her aunt and expressed his gratitude for the care she dedicated to the elderly woman. The young woman, overcoming the initial shock, invited the boxer and his team to share the simple meal they had prepared, a gesture that deeply moved Manny, reminding him of the times of scarcity. The night advanced as Manny, sitting in the small room illuminated by a single lamp, shared with Imelda and Giulietta his plans to repay the kindness he had received years ago. The boxer explained that it wasn't just about personal gratitude, but about recognizing the impact that small acts of kindness can have on the trajectory of an entire life. Before leaving, Manny promised to return the next day with a surprise that would forever change the life of the seamstress and her dedicated niece. The next morning, as the sun was still rising on the horizon of General Santos, a team of workers began to arrive at the community on the hillside. Engineers, architects, and builders, all hired by Manny, began a detailed mapping of the area where Imelda lived. The neighbors, curious about the unusual movement, formed small groups, commenting on the famous boxer's visit the day before and speculating about what would happen next. Giulietta had taken the day off from work, something rare in her exhaustive routine, to follow the developments of Manny's promise. The young woman, still incredulous about recent events, observed the movement of professionals with a mixture of hope and fear, afraid of creating expectations that might not materialize. Imelda, for her part, remained serene in her usual chair, as if life had already taught her not to be surprised by the twists of fate. Shortly before noon, the convoy of luxury cars returned to the community, and Manny descended accompanied by his wife, Jinky, and a group of lawyers carrying folders full of documents. The boxer, smiling broadly, approached Imelda and Giulietta, leading them to the car for a special ride. Neither of the two women imagined what was to come when the vehicle began to travel the streets of General Santos, leaving behind the impoverished community where they had spent so many years of hardship. After 20 minutes of travel, the car stopped in front of a high-standard residential condominium, one of the most exclusive in the city. Manny helped Imelda get out of the vehicle, carefully holding her trembling arm, while Jinky did the same with Giulietta. The group walked to a beautiful two-story house with a well-kept garden and a large porch that resembled, in a luxurious version, the space where Imelda used to sit every day to observe the city in the distance. Before the astonished gaze of the two women, Manny handed Imelda a set of golden keys, explaining that this would be her new home, completely adapted to her special needs, with an elevator between the floors, support bars in the bathrooms, and all the necessary medical equipment to assist in the treatment of Parkinson's. In addition, the boxer had hired a health team for home care, ensuring that the elderly woman would receive appropriate care to improve her quality of life. Giulietta, who for years had sacrificed her own well-being to care for her aunt, would also receive monthly financial support that would allow her to leave her job as a domestic worker and dedicate herself to the studies she had abandoned to support the family. Tears flowed uncontrollably down Imelda's wrinkled face as she slowly toured the spacious rooms of her new home. Every detail had been carefully planned to offer comfort and safety to the elderly woman. Non-slip floors, ergonomic furniture, a winter garden where she could cultivate the medicinal plants she so appreciated. In the main room, a modern sewing machine waited, specially adapted for people with hand tremors, allowing Imelda to resume, even if limitedly, the activity that had been her passion throughout her life. Giulietta walked a few steps behind, equally moved, watching her aunt rediscover the dignity that poverty and disease had gradually stolen. The young woman, who for years had dedicated her youth to caring for Imelda, now found herself facing the possibility of rebuilding her own dreams with the guarantee of a full scholarship to resume the nursing college she had abandoned when her aunt fell ill. Manny had thought of every detail, ensuring that both could start over with dignity. As he accompanied the two women on the tour of the new residence, Manny shared with them the memories that had remained vivid in his mind all those years. He recalled the taste of the simple fish that Imelda prepared with such care, the worn wooden table where he sat to eat, the gentle smile that the seamstress offered him even on days when she barely had enough to feed her own family. Those memories, explained the boxer, had been a motivating force in the most difficult moments of his career, always reminding him of his origins and the values that really mattered. In the main bedroom, adapted with all the necessary equipment for Imelda's treatment, the elderly woman finally could not contain her emotion and collapsed in sobs in Manny's arms. Her trembling hands clung to the boxer's shirt as she repeated, through tears, that she had never imagined that her small gesture of feeding a hungry boy would result in such a blessing so many years later. Giulietta, observing the scene, understood for the first time the impact that a simple demonstration of kindness could have, spanning decades and returning multiplied in the form of gratitude. The afternoon was advancing when Manny finally revealed what he called the true gift. Besides the house and financial support, the boxer had created a small community sewing atelier in the neighborhood named after Imelda. The space would offer free training in sewing and crafts for women from poor communities, generating income and autonomy for families in a situation similar to what Imelda herself had faced. The elderly woman would be the honorary mentor of the project, sharing her experience and wisdom with the new generations, ensuring that her legacy of generosity would continue even when she was no longer present. The following months brought profound transformations in the lives of Imelda and Giulietta. The elderly woman, now receiving adequate medical treatment and balanced nutrition, showed significant improvement in the symptoms of Parkinson's. Her hands, still trembling but with more controlled movements, gradually returned to handling needles and fabrics on the adapted machine, recovering part of the autonomy that the disease had stolen. Weekly physiotherapy sessions and appropriate medications allowed her to enjoy the new phase of life with more comfort and dignity. Giulietta flourished upon returning to her studies, standing out among her nursing colleagues with her practical knowledge acquired during the years caring for her aunt. The young woman, who previously woke up before dawn to face long journeys as a domestic worker, now dedicated herself entirely to college and caring for Imelda without the financial concerns that previously consumed her thoughts. On weekends, both received visits from family members they hadn't seen in years, rebuilding ties that distance and poverty had weakened. The community atelier quickly became a center of social transformation in the neighborhood where it was installed. Dozens of women, many of them heads of vulnerable families, found there not only professional training but a space for welcoming and mutual strengthening. Imelda visited the place twice a week, sharing sewing techniques she had perfected over decades of work, and more importantly, inspiring participants with her story of resilience and the unexpected reward she had received for a simple gesture of compassion. Manny, even amid his busy schedule of professional and political commitments, made a point of regularly visiting Imelda and Giulietta, often bringing his family for relaxed lunches at the house he had given to the seamstress. On these occasions, the boxer liked to sit on the large porch, in the same place where he had found Imelda on that first day on the hill, and talk at length with the elderly woman about life, realized dreams, and lessons learned. For his children, Manny made a point of explaining the importance of that simple woman in his journey, teaching them that true greatness was in small acts of selfless kindness. The story of the reunion between Manny Pacquiao and the seamstress, who fed him in childhood, spread quickly throughout the Philippines, inspiring countless people to value the gestures of generosity they received throughout life and to give back when they had the opportunity. In interviews, the boxer always mentioned Imelda as one of his greatest inspirations, explaining how those simple plates of rice and fish had fed not only his hungry body, but also his spirit, teaching him values that no material wealth could buy. The story of Imelda and Manny thus became a powerful reminder that no act of kindness, however small it may seem, is ever wasted and can return in unexpected and transformative ways decades later. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel.